Hi, Bethany again. I am back to give you some new recommendations. Today, I am going to give you some podcast recommendations. So if you're new to the world of podcasts, it's kind of like radio has had its resurgence. Podcasts are recorded audio content that has a wide range of topics and coverage. I'm going to give you some suggestions for some different topics, and then we'll go from there. So, if you are a fan of true crime TV shows or true crime books, novels, any of those I guess novels aren't really true crime because it's made up, but whatever. If you like murder mysteries, if you like true crime, then you may already know about the podcasts that I'm going to mention, but maybe not, and maybe you're about to discover your new favorite thing. So the two that I would highly recommend for you are Serial, which is kind of the podcast that launched 1,000 podcasts. Serial was a weekly podcast. I don't know if they're still doing new episodes, where they were diving into a case that had some unanswered questions and did manage to answer some of the questions of the case through the investigative approach that they took in the podcast. And the second one is My Favorite Murder, which, the name is great. So My Favorite Murder is another true crime podcast that goes into just exploring different murders and crimes that have happened, and the two co-hosts discuss it in detail. So those are both longer form podcasts, which just means that they range closer to an hour, so like between 45 minutes and an hour. So they're called long form because they take a little longer to listen to, which we all have a little extra time right now, I think, so those might be perfect. If true crime is not for you, it's not for me. Maybe you are into cooking, and if you're into cooking, then my recommendation for this time especially is a new podcast that just came out because of quarantine called Home Cooking, as in we're home cooking. And it is by Samin Nosrat, who you may be familiar with because of her award-winning cookbook, Salt, Fat, Acid, Heat. You may have also seen the Netflix short series that was made to go with the book called Salt, Fat, Acid, Heat. She is a delight. I call her my cooking guru because she just is amazing and it feels like she's your best friend. She teamed up with a friend of hers, Rishikesh Hirway, who is a podcaster. They teamed up together to do a quarantine cooking podcast. So it's only going to have 4 episodes. There's already 3 out. This is long form. It's about an hour or so each. But they took questions about quarantine cooking and how to stretch resources, how to make different things, and it's really fun. They've had some neat guest stars. But there's been a lot of really good cooking tips, especially for right now. So that's Home Cooking by Samin Nosrat. You can find it in the Apple Podcast Store. All of these are available in the Apple Podcast Store or the Google Podcast Store, and they're all free. So I should have said that at the beginning. If cooking is not for you, maybe you are just looking for something inspirational that'll really get your head in a good place. So I have 2 recommendations for you. I will say up front, both of these recommendations are Christian podcasters, so take that for what it is. But these are 2 that are just really inspirational, will give you all the good feels. So the first is The Next Right Thing by Emily P. Freeman. She has a book called The Next Right Thing, which is a wonderful book, and it's really just about making everyday decisions to make life better, and it reminds me of Frozen 2 because there's a song called The Next Right Thing. But she just comes in every week, and this is a short form, so if you feel like an hour is way too long for you, this one is awesome because it's about 8 to 10, sometimes it goes 15 minutes. It's really just a great condensed, here's one thing to do that's your next right thing for this week. And so she's talked about like working from home lately and how to task manage and things like that. Sometimes she just reads a scripture. This week she read Psalm 23 and how it's really helping her this week, but it just gets you in a good mindset. The other one is For the Love with Jen Hatmaker. So Jen Hatmaker is a Christian speaker and author. She is hilarious. That's like her big selling point, I think. She's just really funny. But she has done a podcast for a while, and it's a topical podcast that rotates themes. And right now she's doing some quarantine bonus episodes that are really fun. She's had some really neat people on to interview. Recently she had Jim Gaffigan talking about what isolation has been like for his family in New York City. And she also had Katherine Schwarzenegger Pratt talking about her new book about forgiveness. So there's been some really neat guest stars that I don't know if she would have gotten if we were in our normal time. So that one's really nice, just for a good pick-me-up, feel good. If you are a history buff, like me, I need to tell you about Stuff You Missed in History Class. So this is hosted by two ladies, Holly and Tracy, and it is through the iHeartRadio network, and it is through the How Stuff Works family of podcasts. They have several, and most all of them are really good. I have two that are my favorite. I'll tell you about the other one in a second. So How Stuff Works has these different podcasts. Stuff You Missed in History Class is exactly what it sounds like. These are 30 to 40, sometimes a little longer, minute podcasts that tackle something that maybe wasn't a huge history topic when you were in school. And they cover everything. If you're into like disaster stories, they have something about every disaster that's ever happened, I think. They have episodes about like the great train robberies of the Wild West. They have episodes about like the Great Chicago Fire, the San Francisco earthquake. But then they also do like topical ones about different people throughout history, and they're people you may not know about that are actually really interesting. So that one's really cool. And they've been on for years, so they have a huge back catalog. So if you catch up on the new ones and you're like, oh, I really like this, you can go back and you will find endless amounts of things to listen to. I've been listening for several years, and I don't think I've listened to everything they've put out. Within the same family, maybe history is not your thing, or you like history, but that's not all you want to listen to. I suggest Stuff You Should Know by Josh and Chuck. This one, they've done over 1,000 episodes. They've been on since like 2009, I think. And their topics are everything. It's literally stuff you should know. So they do topics, like they just did a topic about pandemics, which was very suiting. But they cover everything and anything. Some of my favorites are their animal-themed episodes. They've done like how elephants work, how giraffes work, how octopi work. Really, really interesting. And I should say these are family friendly. And if they're not, they will warn you at the front. So sometimes they share a live episode that they did on tour, and it's not family friendly, but they will tell you at the very beginning that it's not. Every other episode is family friendly, and I promise you, if you have an animal lover in your house, your kids will absolutely love any animal episode they do, because they go, like, the detail is amazing. They also do, like, they've done true crime ones, they've done history-related ones, science-related. I mean, just anything that interests them and makes them go, that would be fun to do an episode about, they will do an episode about. So, these are usually come in closer to an hour, so just be aware of that, somewhere between 40 and an hour. But really, really fun. I love them. And finally, because I am a book lover myself, I have to tell you about some awesome book podcasts. And I have a couple, because obviously I love books. So I listen to book podcasts. Why wouldn't I? So I'm going to tell you about a couple to end my podcast recommendations. I'm going to start with my absolute favorite, pretty much like I would say if somebody listens to book podcasts, this is in their wheelhouse. This is the one they listen to. So this is What Should I Read Next by Anne Bogle. Anne is actually a local girl. She's from Louisville. She is an author and a blogger. She started as a blogger. She's written 3 books. The third book just came out last month. She was supposed to go on book tour, didn't get to. So she's doing a stay-at-home book tour. You can watch the videos. It's really cool. She basically, what she does, the formula is this. She has one guest on every week. They talk about bookish things, what their reading life is like, and then she has that person tell her 3 books that are like their favorites, that they loved so much, 1 book that they really didn't, that was not for them, and what they're currently reading. And then what she does is recommends 3 next reads for them. It's really fun, and the best part is that you will eventually, if you listen to several episodes, you will eventually hear somebody talking about their reading life and go, hey, that person is like me. Which is really fun, because then when she gives recommendations, you can jot them down, because they're probably going to be good books for you. In this one, that one is like usually around 45-50 minutes. In addition to that one, she has another podcast. So if your attention span can't handle the 50-minute length, try One Great Book by Anne Bogle, because it's about a 10-minute podcast. And she recommends 1 book from the backlist, so not a new release, that she really loves, and she tells you why, and she gives you an idea of what the book is about. So that's One Great Book and What Should I Read Next? And they're both by Anne Bogle. She is like the book podcast guru. The other one that I will recommend is Currently Reading. Currently Reading is hosted by Meredith Monday Schwartz and Katie Cobb, and they have another lady that sometimes subs in. This one is really fun too, because they have a formula that works really well. They start with a bookish moment of the week, so some way that books intercepted with real life for them. Then they talk about their current reads, so each of them share 3 current reads, and whether they're liking them or not liking them. And then they do some kind of book deep dive. So last week's episode, they talked about books in a series, and if there's a long time between books in a series, should you go back and reread or not? They've also done topics like which books translated well to movies, what are some great middle grade books, or some great young adult books. So they do different topics, and then they press one of their favorite books into your hand at the end. So they have a list of books that they've recommended as press books, which just means this is a book they want to give all their friends to read. That's a long form podcast too. It is about 40 to 50 minutes usually every week. But they're really fun, and they're not bothered by sharing strong opinions, both positive and negative. So it can be really fun if you read a book and just did not like it. Sometimes they also did not like it, and they do not mind saying so, which is kind of nice, because some people get a little weird about giving negative reviews of books in public. But we also need to hear good and bad. So that is Currently Reading, and that one is hosted by Meredith and Katie. And you can also find that one on the podcast store. I promise you that if you start digging into book podcasts, you will find so many more. There are others that I listen to that are really great. Like, I would shout out From the Front Porch, which is a podcast from The Bookshelf, which is a independent bookstore in Georgia. That's a really great one. There are so many out there. So have fun digging into podcasts. Maybe you learned about a new one. I hope so. And happy listening.